Well, I'm in the tent, non-stop rain overnight, pretty heavy and some really strong wind as well at times. But part 2 of the summer, let's see how far we can get. Without data in Switzerland, my Google Maps dropped out and it was back to reading road signs, which worked pretty well, and I could always check my track. I knew I'd be in for a scenic drive as I've come through this way before. Firstly in 2018 on a brilliant Volbeat from Annecy to Interlaken, and also the following year my route was more south when doing the French Alps in heatwave conditions. You do burn a bit more than double the fuel on the way up, but since you can burn nothing on descent, it often works out not too bad. But of course, any time you're using the brakes, you're turning energy into heat, and the engine braking will be a lot. Still, the glide ratio of a car rolling downhill isn't so bad actually. The idea was to cross into France, partly so I could get data again, but I also had a really nice little explore in the evening before returning my car to camp, just in time before the storms. It was getting steep, so I think I've reached the turnaround point, but it's good that there's some water here. This felt really adventurous, and it was almost like cheating that I can get into the mountains like this with a wheelchair. I got a bit carried away though, and on the second attempt I didn't manage to get out of the creek without getting off. Unfortunately, the footage is pretty crap. Enjoy photos from the drive that day as we go. It was a rather wet morning. Parts reminded me of the west coast of New Zealand. Quite a few cyclists out and about. I was often listening to the troubling tales of war in the desert. With great power comes great irresponsibility. World leaders in some cases have literally lost their minds. After buying groceries, squeezing through these cliffs reminded me of some intimidating flying back in spring 2021. I had my first scare with the car when an oil light appeared on the dashboard, but it was, after checking the manual, an easy fix. I left the route briefly to check the Megève airfield, but decided not to disembark to save time. Some memories of hiking through here with Alex back in the day. Getting stuck behind a truck on descent, I wasn't fussed and simply I pulled over in a scenic spot. Down in Albertville I had another car scare, but didn't panic, and afterwards I remember the previous owner had mentioned the diesel particulate filter periodically cleans itself. I hadn't topped up fuel since leaving Czech, and I would later that day. In France the prices vary considerably, like in Australia, but it's possible to check online. I asked the bloke next to me at the Bowser to fill the tank using my card. The second one worked after I checked the pin in the app. A scenic drive in the evening. Yes, I was avoiding the toll roads. Ascending up to a spectacular camp with views of the Vercors. What a great spot. I think I'll camp right there behind the car. And only thing is, I took out the wheelchair, but there's a storm brewing. Might have to pack up in a hurry. Yeah, I did sleep in the car last night out of the rain. Could do that again, I suppose. So this is the setup. It's pretty good. I just thought I'd do a little demo. So that's the video I made that morning and later that day. So it was a nice relaxed morning, the way I like to do a road trip, not rushing too much, not trying to get too many places too far, too quickly. And yeah, beautiful villages. This is still on the northern side of the French Alps. I knew the weather would be better on the southern side, but it still wasn't that amazing actually. It was pretty scratchy, difficult flying. Yeah, that's a pretty impressive rock that I remember seeing somewhere, and I was wondering where it was, and then I saw where it was. Yeah, so there's a pass that I've worked my way towards, crossed into the southern French Alps, and I checked out the airfields at Usp coming up, and then yeah, just up there is Usp, and then from there I went through Serre, through Laragna, close to Chabra, the mountain where hang gliders fly from, or paragliders even. Yeah, feels a bit more like Provence now. And the final stretch out to La Motte-de-Caire, where I Had a flight the next day, but yeah, storms that day and it was cloudy before as well, so just a short one, but pretty awesome. I spent a week at the gliding club, but despite having my own car, I didn't really use it that much. I was happy just to chill, and yeah, did go out of town once or twice with other people, but finally I took my own car and visited a mate for a beer, and then came back. But there was a pretty cool storm brewing, so it was a nice scenic drive. Had a good chop at it, and I didn't charge the battery before I started, so we're all out, but feels better. Because of French bureaucracy, the practical exam I did, there was an administrative problem and I had to do it again, but I couldn't do it on this visit because I had to give them more notice, so I did get to unwind. There was an instructor there who happened to do aerobatics, so that was pretty cool to be able to do that. Finally, it was time to leave the gliding club. I visited the guys who have been taking care of me and still have a bunch of my stuff. I got a new bike rack and I brought my guitar. They have been really wonderful to me.
Bye-bye.
For the route back to Poland, I went a different way for almost all of it. First, it was familiar territory, not driving, but on the bike. And there are so many great routes you could do around here cycle touring. Clue to Bale. I've just set up camp. Time for a cheese sandwich. Maybe a bit of guitar later. Well, I got up from the tent and there's a handy little catabatic blowing. It's pretty chilly, but I left the car key out of reach, so I can't put any warm clothes on. But I've been awake for hours, just so excited about the possibilities with this new lightweight glider. So later that day I'd catch up with Nikki, the next day I'd catch up with Shane, and on the third day I was planning to visit One Comet, which are making these lightweight gliders, so yeah, that's what I was excited about all night long. I was cranking music from Tea Party, another 90s band with great guitar, as I descended alongside canyons and then drove into Gap. The traffic passing there wasn't amazing, and as I drove north it was another hot blue day. When I bought the car, Camilla's only requirement was that it had air conditioning, and well, yeah, it wasn't working. But along with the tyre and windscreen change and the timing belt, they regassed it, and I'm pretty sure at that point it was still working. It ran out of puff when I got back to Camilla's, in fact. Catching up with Nikki was great. We chilled by a lake and she probably could have guessed that I'd rope her into helping me tidy the mess in the back of my car, being my official X-Alps supporter before the accident. Got her to top up the fuel as well. I'd also picked up a Polish and Brazilian couple just out of town. It didn't really make sense to take them from their spot, but they did want to go to Switzerland and I was going there tomorrow. As it turned out, they hitchhiked to another French lake while I was catching up with Nikki, so I headed north, catching views of Mont Blanc on my own. Getting through Albertville a week earlier, I'd got a little stuck, but this time it was much worse, especially when I started a wild goose chase to try and avoid the traffic. It was great to climb up the hills at a place where I knew I'd have awesome views, not only of Mont Blanc, but also the Arabi range where I'd had my accident 2 years before. Well, I went down to start with, but I've come back up. I think I'm as high as I was, and Mont Blanc. Silly me, I just leant over, stretching out as far as I could to get some water, and bang! Right in my chest. I didn't see the electric fence. Pretty silly. Yeah, it gave me a belting. It's been, I don't know when I last got electrocuted, probably 20 years. Luckily it didn't seem to do much apart from just bang! I was like, it took me a couple of seconds to realise what actually happened. Oh well, I don't know if I'll get water. I can hear it, but I'm not going to try and get to it. Well, that's why I always make sure I've got water in the car. I had intended to spend the morning up here before driving into Switzerland, but also wanted to catch up with Shane Tighe, a mate from Oz, on the way. So further up this range on the right is where I had my accident over 2 years ago. Where I had my last flight from, I believe. As it appeared on the map, it's quite a bit up and down, so I'm not sure if I want to do the wheelchair push anymore. But the toilet thing is done, thanks to those bikers. One of them gave me a bit of a push. I guess if you're superstitious, it might haunt you to come back to this place, because here I can see where I took off on my last paragliding flight, and down that ridge on the other side is where I crashed. But looking back at it, I didn't really see any reason why it should have happened on this day. Everything seemed right. I've taken a lot more risks and a lot worse things happened in the past. And later I found it was probably more to do with the helicopter than anything else. This was the short part of the route where I was retracing my steps. Some tractors ensured that I didn't rush through. It was great to catch up with Shane, and we had so much to talk about that we didn't even mention X-Pier and how well he'd done in that. I would love to follow him in the X-Alps. It was pretty handy to have a shower, change my catheter and get a feed before heading off to Switzerland. I picked up a hitchhiker and took them up the valley from Chamonix. It's really great travelling through these places I know from X-Alps and other trips, and thinking of flights I've done in the past. I drove into the guts of Switzerland and it looked like I'd only reached the Grimsel Pass on dusk. We'd had hot weather for a while, but the change would come through during the night. It was too busy around the Grimsel Pass to camp in the wild, but I also had to think about strong winds and thunderstorms. I ended up finding the perfect spot. I think it just started raining. I'm so lucky I'm under these rocks, but I did think it's possible there'll be runoff coming down the road towards me. And then as I settled down into the tent just behind the car here, I saw a few flashes, and then probably half an hour later it was close enough to hear thunder. And now I'm glad I'm in this sheltered spot. Yeah, hopefully it's alright with the runoff, but oh, it's an awesome feeling being undercover when it's raining.